All right, so what you're going to be learning about today is really just a review of the Pythagorean theorem and right triangle trig. So how do you know when to use each? The Pythagorean theorem is only for whenever you're looking for sides. So if it's asking you to find a side, then if you have two known sides, you can use the Pythagorean theorem. It also has to be a right triangle. For right triangle trig, which is SOHCAHTOA, is what a lot of you know it as. It's for angles and sides. So if you're trying to find an angle or a side, you can use it. And all you really need to have is a right triangle. In any other situation, just about, you can use right triangle trig. So how do you know when to use which? If you have two sides, then you're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. If you don't have two sides, then you can use SOHCAHTOA. And really, you can use SOHCAHTOA even if you do have two sides. How do you know which one is the longest side? So that's your C in a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or it's your H in SOHCAHTOA. That's just going to be across from the right angle. So I will show you how to do that in each of these problems. Okay, so for this first example, notice we asked ourselves the question, do I have two sides? Okay, so yes, here I do have two sides, so we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. All right, so this one, yes, two sides. Okay, so that means that we're going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so how to figure out the c? The c is always going to be across from your right angle. So here, this is across from your right angle. So this is going to be your c that you're looking for. Okay, so we're going to do 4 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. Okay, 4 squared is 16, 8 squared is 64, and this is going to equal c squared. So we're going to do 16 plus 64, which is going to give us 80. And then c is being squared, so to get it by itself, we're just going to take the square root of both sides. And we don't need to take the negative of the square root because we're looking at side lengths, so that can't be negative. So c is going to equal the square root of 80. But notice in this problem, it says in simplest radical form, okay, simplest radical form. What that means is that we're going to have to make a factor tree of 80 and see if we can pull something out. Okay, so we're going to make a factor tree of 80. All right, two factors of 80. It doesn't really matter which one you start out with, but I'm going to start with 10 and 8. Factors of 10 are 2 and 5. Factors of 8 are 2 and 4. And then factors of 4 are 2 and 2. And then we're just going to bring all the other numbers down. Okay, so notice we have one pair of 2's right here, and then we have another pair of 2's right here. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be able to pull out 1, 2 from this pair, and then we're going to pull out 1, 2 from that pair. And then what's left over is going to be the 5, which is going to be inside of the square root. So the 5 is going to stay inside, but we're going to pull out 1, 2, and then we're going to pull out another 2. So we're going to be pulling out 2 times 2, which is going to be 4. Okay, so this is your answer in simplest radical form. In simplest radical form. Okay, so this is how you're going to work the very first problem, and this is probably one of the more complex examples because you can reduce the square root of 80 to 4 square root of 5. So let's move on to a second example. All right, the first thing that we're going to ask ourselves is, do I have two given sides? So here, notice I have a right triangle and I have two given sides. So we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem here. All right, and again, that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we can figure out what's our c by looking across from the right angle. So across from the right angle happens to be this side that we're looking for here. So we're going to call that one c. Okay, so now we can work this problem out. We're going to have 68 squared plus 51 squared equals c squared. And then I'm just going to use my handy dandy calculator. So I'm going to use my phone calculator. 68 squared, you can just do 68 times 68. So that'll be 4,624. Or you can tilt your phone to the side like this. And you can actually do, let's do this for 51. You can do 51 and then press this x squared button. And it'll square it for you. So that's going to be 2,601. And then we're just going to add those two things together. Okay, so we're going to get 7,225 equals c squared. And then we're going to have to take the square root of both sides. Okay, so the way that we're going to do this is in your calculator, whenever you turn it to the side, you're going to have the number there. And then you're just going to press this little square root button. It says 2, and then it has a root, and then x. And that gives us a perfect square. So the square root of that is going to be just the number 85. So this one actually came out nice and neat, and we didn't have to reduce it at all. So it's going to be just 85 as your answer, 85. Okay, so let's move on to some examples that might be slightly more complicated, if you will. So let's move on down to the bottom here. All right, so the first question you're going to ask yourself is, do I have two sides that I know? And I only have this one here that is 87. So that means that we cannot do the Pythagorean theorem. So what we're going to do here is SOHCAHTOA. But before we start, let me show you how I write SOHCAHTOA. I think that it will help you guys out in figuring out what is what. I write it as S equals O over H. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. That's the SO. C equals A over H. Okay, so that's the SOHCA. And then we're going to do T equals O over A. So this is SOHCAHTOA. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent equals opposite over adjacent. Okay, so now the most important part here is going to be labeling our sides. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put my finger on this angle 25. Okay, so if I put my finger on top of it, that's the angle that we're given. Whatever side you're not touching is going to be your opposite side. So notice how my finger is touching this side and this side. That means that this is going to be my opposite side here. Okay, so notice my finger is touching both of these sides. So that guy over there is my opposite. And you should just put OPP, but you can put whatever you want. And then as we talked about earlier, the one across from the right angle is going to be your hypotenuse. Okay, so this is your longest side. So 87 is going to be your hypotenuse. And then the side that's left over is just going to be your adjacent. So I'm just going to put A, B, J. Okay, so now looking at this, I want to ask myself, what two sides did this problem label for me? Okay, so notice it labeled the hypotenuse. That's something that it gave me. The opposite has nothing with it, so we're not going to use the opposite at all. But it did label our adjacent as x. Okay, so what we're going to be using here is the adjacent and the hypotenuse. So looking here, that uses the opposite and hypotenuse. Cosine uses the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Tangent uses the opposite and the adjacent. So we're going to be using cosine here. And the way that you always write this is cosine of the angle. So the angle is going to go inside there. So we're going to put 25 equals the adjacent side. Okay, so that's whatever we labeled the adjacent. So we labeled it x divided by the hypotenuse. Okay, so whatever is labeled the hypotenuse is what's going to go on the bottom. Okay, so this is our setup here. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to cover up this left-hand side and ask ourselves, what is happening to x here? So notice that x is being divided by 87. So what would we do to get rid of this 87? We'd have to do the opposite operation, which is multiplying by 87 on both sides. So here we need to multiply by 87. All right. And we're going to get x equals 87 times cosine of 25. Okay, so let me show you how I do this in my phone calculator. All right, first it looks like this, but I'm actually going to turn it to the side, and it gives me all the new things. And since we're going to try to find cosine of 25, you have to type in the angle first. So I'm going to do 25, and then I'm just going to press cosine. So you can see cosine is right there. So you type in 25, and then you just press cosine. So cosine of 25 is 0.9063. Okay, so let's just put that here. It's 87 times 0.9063. But what we can actually do here is once we have that number in there, we can just type in times 87. Okay, so this is cosine of 25 times 87. So it's going to be 78.848. 78. Hey everyone. Sorry about that. My screencast actually stopped recording. So here we are back on this last problem. You get 78.849. On the fourth example, I've actually already worked it for you because it stopped recording unknowingly. But you're just given this problem initially, and you want to go ahead and label your different sides. So again, you put your finger on the angle. Whatever side you're not touching, you're going to label your opposite. Whatever side is opposite from the right angle, you're going to label your hypotenuse, and then the other side, you're going to label your adjacent. Once you have done that, you want to highlight which ones were labeled for you by the problem. So this one was the opposite and the hypotenuse. So since we're using opposite and hypotenuse, you're going to do sine. Okay, that uses the opposite and the hypotenuse. So you're always going to start out sine of the angle equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So the side that was labeled opposite was x, and then divided by the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse was 8.3. Then how you do it in your calculator again, you're going to type in 18, and then you're just going to click the sine button. Okay, you're just going to click sine. So you're going to get 0.309, and this is going to equal x over 8.3. So since x is being divided by 8.3, we get rid of that by multiplying both sides by 8.3. And in your calculator, you can just do times 8.3, and that will give you the answer, 2.56, and if we're rounding it up, 0.565. So that's going to give us x equals 2.565. All right, the next problem, which was also worked for you, but I'm just going to cover it up because I think it's kind of distracting, is number 5. So here you're given this problem, and the first thing you're going to do is put your finger on the angle. Whatever side you're not touching, you're going to label your opposite side. So the side I'm not touching is over here, so I'm going to label that opposite. The side across from the right angle, you're going to label your hypotenuse. And then the other side, I'm just going to label your adjacent. So since the two sides that it labeled for me already were the opposite and the adjacent, see, notice the hypotenuse doesn't have anything with it, then we're going to use tangent because that uses the opposite and the adjacent side. Okay, so we're going to do tangent of the angle, so tangent of 77 equals the opposite over the adjacent. So it's going to be x over 2.6. Tangent of 77, you can figure out by typing in your calculator. So you're going to do 77 and then click the tangent button. So it's going to be 4.331. And then notice x is being divided by 2.6. So to get rid of it, you're going to multiply both sides by 2.6. Okay, so we're going to multiply that number by 2.6. And you're going to get 11.26, but the 8 rounds the 1 up to a 2. So 11.262 is going to be your answer here. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like in Desmos. All right, or in Delta Math, sorry, in Delta Math. So this is the type of problem that it's going to give you. And notice this one gives you two sides. So what you're going to be using here is the Pythagorean Theorem. And if you get confused, you can click Show Solution. I accidentally clicked the wrong thing. But you can click Show Solution, and it will show you exactly how to work out the problem. So let's see here. This one you're doing a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and you can see that the square root of 49 equaled 7. Another type of problem that it's going to give you is something like this. But notice that it actually labels the whole figure for you. Hang on, let me show you. It looks like this, okay? So it's going to have everything labeled for you. So these words actually don't really mean anything. But you can click Show Solution, and it will show you exactly how to solve this problem if you're confused. Okay, so it's going to label it the exact same way I did. It's going to label the opposite, the adjacent, the hypotenuse. Which function uses the adjacent and the opposite? Okay, well, that's going to be tangent. So this actually gives you more detail than I did. And then you're going to have to multiply by 2.6 to both sides. And this is actually rounding to the nearest tenth. So please make sure that you round it to 1 decimal place. I know in my video I was rounding to 3. Because it will count your problem wrong if you do that incorrectly. All right, as always, please let me know if you have any questions at all. I will be very happy to help you. You can message me and remind, you can put it in the discussion forum, or you could even email me if you'd like to. Thank you.